ready and waiting. See your heart's reflection. Enemies of Section 6 shall pay. Let's roll! Preemptive strike. Mind and body. Let's roll! Mind and body. Preemptive strike. Enemies of Section 6 shall pay. Preemptive strike. Mind and body.
Okay, let's get started. Yanagi doesn't need Bernice or any other anomaly character at all. There's a ludicrously strong comp available to Yanagi which is often overlooked, and that is the nuke comp. As you have seen, it does a lot of damage and oftentimes kills Shiyu bosses within a single stun. Disorder scales off the initial anomaly applied. This means no matter the stats or type of character to trigger the second anomaly, the first character stats matter more and by a long shot. Think of the second anomaly as the fuse that ignites the first anomaly, nothing more. This means where the second anomaly proc doesn't matter, nor do the stats or the damage of that same anomaly proc. You don't need to bring a character like Bernice and are able to use everything to buff Yanagi to the moon, maximizing the damage of shock and in turn the true disorder proc. That's the logic on how the entire build works. Basically hypercarry Yanagi, but triggering not just the polarity disorders, but the true disorder as well, which will also scale with all the buffs that are going into Yanagi. This leads to the next part, which is what affects disorder damage, and the answer is a lot. The disorder calc is as shown, but to not bore you, the short answer is corruption and shock disorder do the most damage, scaling off attack and have a lot of modifiers, mainly anomaly proficiency, damage percent bonuses, and enemy modifiers such as being stunned and being afflicted by debuffs. Since damage calculations are a balancing act, we want our finger in every pie. We want shock damage, disorder damage, the enemy to be stunned, attack buffs, anomaly proficiency, and finally, pen buffs or defense shreds. We want it all, and that's what we have in mind when building the team, which is the perfect segue into team building. Regarding stunning the enemy, we have few options that work well. Caesar both stuns and provides tons of buffs, so if you build her 4-piece Freedom Blues like I did, and play her well, you can rack up Assault build up to be able to swap off just before you stun. You can play Quick Swap where you constantly assist parry into Caesar to get more days if you need it as well. At times, it might be better to run a Fizz Anomaly build-up Bang Boo like Revolver Boo or Lucky Boo to make sure that the Fizz Anomaly build-up is sufficient alongside the days. Qingyi doesn't work, not only because she is electric, which we'll get to later, but because her passive cannot be triggered due to the lack of an attacker. This makes second place Lycon. That is, so long as you can trigger his core passive to increase damage done to today's enemies. While I have no doubt Lighter is a better stunner overall, he doesn't buff Yanagi whatsoever. In a fully functional build, you only need one stun window to defeat an enemy from full HP to nothing on this new build. That's just how strong it is. Lycan helps maximize damage and provides buffs, so Lycan performs better here. Now, if you have none of the three aforementioned characters, Seth is actually a pretty strong choice. Since he is also electric, he will trigger Yanagi's secondary passive as well as giving you much more freedom for your last buffer of choice, while also providing stellar buffs himself. Honestly, a brilliant choice if you can stun reliably on him, and even if you can't stun with him, he's still an amazing free-to-play option. Now onto our supports. You can run Sokaku and Lucy for the attack buff. Sokaku's attack buff is much better and she provides a lot of ice anomaly, which is wonderful synergy with Lycon, although it means missing out on Yunagi's passive. If she isn't with Lycon, however, her buff can be a little awkward due to the specifics of disorder, and on a team with Caesar, the attack buff is a little oversaturated, while Lucy's sub DPS makes up for that. Speaking of Lucy, as mentioned with Caesar, she is brilliant because her sub DPS is excellent at M6, and her buff uptime at M6 is also substantial. However, her buff is weaker than other options, without question. So while she is incredibly good, she ends up lacking when it's compared to our next two options, even assuming she's performing at her best. Moving on to the aforementioned supports, Nicole and Rena provide pen and shred buffs, or defense shred buffs respectively. Nicole's shredding defense is excellent, and she also provides a boatload of anomaly build-up, so getting things ready is a lot easier than with the stunners. Her defense shred is good, 40%, and she has very little field time, allowing your Yanagi Seth stun combo to do a lot while the boss is yet to be stunned. The problem is defense shred gets less valuable as you get more pen percent and vice versa, so defense shred isn't making as big of a deal as it usually would be. Being Ether means her corruption disorder is great, but it also means her best team is locked to Seth if you want to make use of Yanagi's passive as well. Finally, her debuff durations are abysmally short, so you gotta be fast. Of our supports, she has the second highest potential, but will also be the hardest to work with. Finally, to our last and best choice, which is Rena. Rena has her passive extended duration of shock. Since Shock Disorder grabs all potential shock procs and triggers them all at once, Rena simply existing in the team leads to substantially more damage. She triggers Yanagi's passive, allowing any final slot from stunners to buffers, and finally, she provides a lot of pen, which Yanagi scales really well with, unlike the rest of the characters. Now some important advice. Advice number 1. If you are in a situation where you still have energy left on Yanagi for polarity disorder, but you just triggered shock, trigger the polarity disorder first. Even though it will slightly decrease the damage of the true disorder proc due to wasting shock ticks. This is because Yanagi's polarity disorder scales off the current anomaly built up on the enemy. On your own shock procs, you can see me doing easily hundreds of thousands of more damage than after using polarity disorder on a Caesar assaulted enemy, even when Caesar is built anomaly. Different elements like corruption, polarity disorder, and the like would perform better, but I don't think they'll match your shock polarity disorder, scaling off your crazily buffed Yanagi. This means your nuke should be the last thing you do. Advice number 2. You buff during the application, not during the damage. Anomaly effects store up your buffs and damage done while you are building up the anomaly. Ignoring debuffs or enemy mods like the defense shred or the stun mod, if you buff yourself after the shock triggers and then try to nuke, the shock damage or well the true disorder proc isn't affected. You are buffing up your next shock instead. This means if you are aiming to nuke on a fully buffed shock. If this means losing the stun multiplier, so be it. Nuking on a half-buffed shock mod will do less than nuking on a fully buffed shock proc, even with the stun mod not being included. This does however mean that other characters like Rena taking up the anomaly build-up reduces the damage of shock done, which leads to advice number 3, maximize your shock. If you have Rena or Seth on your team, your mission objective is to try and trigger a second shock ASAP. If you are fast enough and can build up a second shock while fully buffed, you get maximized damage, because a shock proc isn't diluted by the other electric characters on the team with much worse anomaly-centered stats. Maximized shock damage leads to maximized polarity disorder damage, which leads to maximized true disorder damage. And trust me, it's a lot more damage. Be aware that enemies who are electric resistant or simply have larger anomaly bars normally aren't worth trying to force this to happen every time, as it would be too difficult and not worth the hassle. Bangbu like Plug Boo and Electro Boo can help, but they only help, they can't make it work for you. And with that out of the way, please enjoy the gameplay, and I hope I helped.
A preemptive strike. Mind and body